And was reflecting back almost 7 years ago when Sergeant Major Ken Preston and his bride Karen's life changed. I was in the green zone, and the news began to go around in the headquarters building that their lives were going to change significantly as he was named the Sergeant Major of the Army. And I still remember going into his office and asking Sergeant Major of the Army to be, elect if you will, how that was going to change his life. In fact, what was the first thing that went through his mind when he got the notice? And of course, like any good spouse, Ken Preston said, I called Karen. And I asked her what she thought about it, because it was really going to also be a corporate decision that we had together. And war does change things. And for the last almost 7 years, Karen and Ken Preston have shared their lives, and she's really shared the Sergeant Major of the Army as he's traveled all over the United States and in our combat zones to ensure that our great soldiers are being taken care of. And how about a round of applause for this family? War changes things. You don't have a choice. My quick story, I had just come back home, and within almost a month's time, I'd lost my father. My oldest daughter had had our first grandchild, one of 4, by the way, and my dog died. I did not realize the effect that year of deployment had on my life until AFN came in to interview me as the Corps chaplain and to talk about the challenges of being away from your spouse for a year and providing spiritual care. And it was only until I looked at a picture of my dog on the mantle that I lost it. And I didn't realize that I had tears that could come very quickly as a result of how war changes things. And that's why I want to wave the banner this morning as we think about resilience for a tired and a stressed army, an army being at war for the longest as far as an all-volunteer army in the 235-year history of our nation. That as we think resilience, let us never forget the importance of the spiritual dimension of carrying ourselves in these tough days of being a soldier, of being a family member, a DOD civilian supporting this war effort. And so I've got a picture here, a reminder of all of the challenges that are out there. We, from the spiritual dimension, look at all of the seasons of our soldiers' lives, the celebrations, the oaths, the marriages. We also follow our soldiers into harm's way. Here's a soldier receiving spiritual nourishment somewhere in the mountains of northeastern Afghanistan, because our Constitution says something about it's important for us to always remember that our soldiers, regardless of where they are in times of peace or war, have an opportunity to exercise their freedom of religion under our great Constitution, the First Amendment. And perhaps that's what we need to be thinking about this morning as in these next few minutes as we look at strong bonds in other areas, as we are providing strength, support, resources for the soul of our soldier. Next slide, please. I heard General Reuben Jones, he was talking about a photograph that was in his office. He saw it every morning as he reflected at 5:30 when he turned the light on. Well, I've got a couple of interesting pictures in my office as well. The top picture is a picture of a chaplain praying over the commander-in-chief and the soldiers at Valley Forge as they gather for their souls to be nourished in a long, cold, deadly winter as we fought for the freedom of this nation. And down below there's another picture that you can see frequently, rehearsed and played over and over again as we visit our soldiers and anytime they go out on the most dangerous roads in the world. They'll gather sometimes with a chaplain, sometimes not, it doesn't matter, but they gather in a circle similar to that 235-year-old picture above as they look for that strength for their souls. And I think that's what we're doing today. We're fighting for the soul of our soldiers and our family members during one of the toughest times of our Army's history. A great quote there by General of the Army, George Catlett Marshall, as he says, it's really a matter of soul. And as we've gone through this long war, there are some soul needs that we really need to focus on, because out of our soul really comes the issues of the heart as we're focusing on those things. Next slide. We've looked at the impact of spiritual fitness on our Army. It's a positive thing that we need to be focusing on, because here's a study that's been done by a professor at Duke University over the last 30 years looking at the impact of spiritual fitness. That as we work on that particular area, it improves our emotional health, our well-being. It improves our marriages. It ties us into communities. It prevents us from getting into addictive behaviors, attitudes. It makes us a better citizen within our military and civilian communities. Erwin McManus with Mosaic Community Church in Los Angeles, California, has come up with a book recently. It's called Soul Cravings. And he says that all of us crave for about 3 things in our lives. If we don't get the right, if you will, the right medicine, the right resources for those 3 areas in our life, we can fall into negative behavior. It says we all have a need for intimacy, for love. We all have a need for purpose. Does my life count? What happens if I die in a foreign land? Does it really count? And we have a reason for destiny in our lives. That's what soul care, that's what spiritual resilience is all about. That's what we're here to promote. We've got about 4 particular initiatives that we've been looking at over the last number of years, especially during this time of war, that you may have heard about, but let me re-emphasize those once again. Obviously, one of the best initiatives that the Army has introduced is the comprehensive soldier fitness. We're looking at those 5 areas of our lives that if they do not stay full, we can become imbalanced. Imbalanced in our thinking, imbalanced in our actions, ensuring that we have those resources physically, emotionally, socially, as an individual and as a spiritual person. Those of you who have access to AKO, those of you who have taken the global assessment tool, you could go there today, and there are 5 resources there on the spiritual dimension chart. Very generic, which reaches across all of our Army and all of our spiritual or our religious affiliations. And you can work, and so can our soldiers work on their own spiritual well-being so that we can head toward this particular direction. Secondly, spiritual resilience is so important that we've gotten money recently through an Army study program to focus on the effects. What are the effects of spiritual fitness on our soldiers who have deployed downrange? It will be a study that takes a short period of time, but I think we're going to find that as a result of those who are continuing to improve in their area of their own personal spiritual fitness, that we'll probably see some of these positive things. And who would not want these types of characteristics in a home or a military community? Thirdly, our chaplains, part of that caregiving bunch. We are part of the casualties of war. Caregiving is difficult. We expend ourselves, as many of you have in this room, as you give on behalf of others. And within the last 5 years, we've had 3 of our chaplains take their lives. 5 of our chaplain assistants who have taken their lives through suicide. So we've stood up an initiative at our chaplain school at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, an initiative to ensure that our chaplains and our chaplain assistants are keeping themselves spiritually fit and strong as they give to the spiritual needs of our soldiers, civilians, and families. And of course, there's another program that has created so much interest. It is effective across the Army, and that is in the area of the Strong Bonds program. Next slide, please. General Casey, he's asked me more than one occasion, is the Strong Bonds program a chaplain program or a commander's program? Let me remind you, soldiers and families belong to commanders. Spiritual fitness, along with the fitness of our soldiers in all aspects of their areas of their lives, belong to the commanders. And we advise the commanders and the command sergeants major and the senior leadership on how best to take care of the needs of our soldiers and families. And so that's what Strong Bonds is about. Yes, you'll see chaplains that are there leading with the best resources that are out on the market to help improve relationships, communication skills, to take away perhaps communication barriers, to improve the intimacy among our soldiers and their spouses. It's not just a program just for married couples. We've seen all types of varieties of audiences that are participating in strong bonds. Single soldiers participate in strong bonds. Blended families participate. Those who have recently gone through divorce or a loss of a family member participate in strong bonds. Our children are interested in strong bonds. You know, there's been some interest here the last couple of forums regarding how are we taking care of special needs kids. We've had our first, to my knowledge, strong bonds for an EFMP family that was conducted by Fort Gordon back in July. Colonel D.J. Reyes and his bride Julie have a child with autistic spectrum disorder. And they said, you know, we need to connect with somebody so that we as a family can go apart in a safe environment and discuss the challenges, find that support group so that we can enjoy, have a better time as an Army family. It's interesting, as they did that, one of the family members says, you know, I feel like I've been in an ocean with no life preserver. I've been dog paddling, and there's been no one there to assist me with the pressing needs of raising an autistic child in a military environment. The group participated, and here are some of the challenges that they described. Having to deal with judgment by others, misunderstandings, isolation, fear, worry, guilt, sorrow, sense of loss, time constraint, worrying about my child's future, worried about our siblings. Who's the support group for siblings who have autistic brother or sisters? Not enough time for special needs children. What's the effect of this special needs child on our marriage? Not enough funding, not enough money to put towards therapy and our future. And so they blazed the trail with that first Strong Bonds program. Again, military families getting together with a specific need of a family, which has not only improved that relationship of that husband and that wife, but it's made them aware of something that's very important in our military environment as we're constantly deploying and having all of these zip codes in our portfolio. In my case, 25 zip codes in 37 years of marriage. Here's what they found out. We are not alone. And that's one of the great things that I believe that's important if you've got nothing more from these forums over the past several days. We're not alone. There are resources, not just from the chaplain's standpoint as far as spiritual fitness resources that are here in this room. There are resources for all of the needs of our military family, probably unlike any other organization or any other institution that you and I will ever be affiliated with here on this earth. I believe the Army is doing a great job trying to help the particular needs of our military, even in a time of war. By the way, why is it so critical? It was brought up about suicide prevention and how important it is to promote our health and risk reduction of those who are perhaps susceptible to suicide. 3 reasons why so many of our soldiers are taking their lives. 1, because of a failed relationship. 2, because of a personal shame that is about to come upon them or their family. The CID, the MPs, the UCMJ actions about to take place. But thirdly, and this one probably bothers me more than all of them, the number of our soldiers and families, perhaps, who consider self-destructive behavior because of isolation. You are not alone. We are all in this together. My prayer for you as we challenge ourselves to stay fit spiritually is that you plug yourself in to some type of life group. A group where you can affiliate with someone with positive attitudes, constructive beliefs, morals, and behaviors. That's what spiritual fitness is all about, not just practiced alone, but in many cases practiced in the context of a like-minded religious faith group or other type of belief. So please hear from me today as the Chief of Chaplains as we continue to do our best to advise the commander on the spiritual fitness of the Army as well as your respective units, but also to keep you plugged in to one another. We're not alone. You're not isolated. We are an Army-strong community. God bless you, and thanks for your service.
Thank you, Chaplain Carver. And now we'll please welcome Dr. Stanley.
Thank you. It's really terrific to be here. I am a research professor at the University of Denver. I work with Howard Markman and Elizabeth Allen on a large study looking at Army couples, which I'm going to tell you a little bit about today and give you a sense of it. It's particularly an outcome study on an aspect of strong bonds, and I'll also make a few comments about some of the basic research we do in terms of how Army couples are doing. Next, please. First off, just a little bit of background. PrEP is a program that we have developed over many years based on lots of research, most of it funded by NIH. It stands for the Prevention and Relationship Enhancement Program. It's an educational curriculum for strengthening marriage that's been extensively researched around the world by different research teams, developed by Howard Markman, my colleague of 33 years. I know I don't look that old, right? And many other people that we've worked with. Next. We've been privileged since 1989 to work with Chaplain Corps in all branches of the service. We started working with the Navy in 1989 and then extensively with the Air Force in the early 90s and then beyond, and then especially and strongly and in a most organized way with the Army from about 1995 on. We've also done a fair amount of work with family advocacy over the years. And I just want to make one quick comment before I get into some aspects of the study. One of the things that's been tremendous from our experience is working with the Chaplain Corps. And in terms of the long-standing interest we have in terms of couples and how they're doing and what they're coping with and how they cope, our experience and our impression is that chaplains are in a particularly great spot to reach and help families. We have long believed that the messenger matters a great deal in who is reached, how they're reached, and the messages and how they're conveyed. And I think particularly at this time of very high stress with military duty for service persons and their families, chaplains have a pretty unique kind of an opportunity, at least from my perspective as an outsider, that seems like a very strong position to be in because they're very much part of and in the Army in this case. But they're also, because of who they are and the nature of their work, they have this sort of one step removed kind of feature in terms of who they are and people's sense of their approachability and what can be shared and how they can share it. And I think that's a tremendous asset in working with the marriages and the couples. Next. So the Army Marriage Project, let me be clear about this, is a project of our team at the University of Denver, and I'll make this comment in a minute, that's funded by NIH. So this is not a study funded by the Army or funded by the Chaplain Corps. It is funded by your tax dollars in terms of the National Institute of Health. Next. We started this study 5 years ago, and in particular, about 4 years ago, we ramped up the first phase of it. We are following 662 Army couples. We first recruited 478 couples at Fort Campbell, and then in the year after that, which was the beginning of the third year of the project, we recruited 184 couples at Fort Benning. And we're following these couples with assessments every 6 months since then, and we're hoping to get renewed funding from January forward to continue following them. So we're following them through deployments, we're following them through changes in their life, through what's happening in terms of their military careers and service, and what's happening at home in the families. And we're assessing both the soldier in this case and the spouse. Now, there's two aims of this project. I'm going to comment on both and then make some general comments before I finish. One is to evaluate PrEP for Strong Bonds, which is a core component of the Strong Bonds initiative overall, in a randomized trial, which means the couples are randomly assigned to either receive or not to receive the training, and then we follow and see how they do over time. And we're also about generating basic science that can help inform all kinds of people that do various work to help couples in the services. Next. As I mentioned, this research project is funded by NIH, particularly the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development, and the principal investigators are I and Howard Markman and Elizabeth Allen. Next. Now, I want to present a couple of key findings and then say a few things about them from the study so far. Next. First off, in terms of what we're studying, to give you a little bit of a sense of what it actually is and what we're doing, Prep for Strong Bonds, in terms of the way we're studying it in this particular project, is a 14-hour program with 15 modules. Now, there's a lot of versions of prep that are actually used very frequently by chaplains at this point in one-day models or retreat models or other kinds of models, but this particular one was a 14-hour version. We teach communication skills, how to preserve fun and friendship, forgiveness, commitment, support, deployment and reintegration, and many other things. And I can best give you a sense of how we think about what we're doing or how we're trying to help couples with a metaphor. And it's interesting, General, that you mentioned your dog, because I'm going to mention my dog as well. My dog Odie, who's actually world famous because I've given whole talks somewhat around him and his anatomy. Which you'll understand in a moment. And the point I'll make with couples is this, and it encapsulates a lot of what you have to do to help a couple make it, to help a couple get by. Those of you that are into dogs, and if you're into cats, that's fine too. You can kind of apply this, but we're talking dogs here at the moment. Think about when you first fall in love with that puppy, especially if you get the dog as a puppy. Now, the point I like to make with couples is this, and it's very succinct. You fall in love with the front end of the puppy. But every puppy has a back end. And that's the way marriages are. That's the way relationships are. You know, there's the part we're excited about, the part we're attracted about. There's all the good stuff, the happy to see you jumping up and all that kind of stuff. And then there's the back end that kind of has to be managed. Now, here's a really important point for couples. And think about the back end, by the way. It's all about time and place and structure, right? Okay? That's it. But here's the deal. The back end ain't going well. You can't be positive enough on the front end to have things make it. Now, we do in our curricula and a lot of other kinds of services and different curricula that the chaplains are using in Strong Bonds, the goal is to help people to preserve the front end, but also to manage the back end well. All right, a couple of key findings. First off, next, we have evaluated so far divorce outcomes at 1 year for now. Initially, we did with Fort Campbell because they're 1 year ahead, and then Fort Benning. And this is a very noteworthy finding in the field of relationship and marriage education. So Fort Campbell, a significant difference 1 year later with a divorce rate in the control group of 6% and in the Prep for Strong Bonds group of 2%. At Fort Benning at 1 year, there's not a significant difference, and there's only 4 couples that have divorced. Many more couples have divorced at Campbell. I'll comment about that in a second. And then at both sites, you can see that that averages out to about half the rate of divorce for the couples that have taken Prep for Strong Bonds. Next. We also measure things like communication skills and the strength of the positive bond between couples and attitudes about sacrificing and many other things, not all of which are significant in terms of measuring impacts. But from pre to post, we get changes on lots of dimensions, such as those listed here. And 1 year later, we're still seeing clear changes in what the couples tell us in terms of communication skills and positive attitudes about sacrificing. Now, these findings are more significant at Campbell than at Benning. Next. Now, I want to comment briefly on the difference about Benning and Campbell. Campbell, the couples tend to be younger, somewhat earlier in their military careers, and much more in a major operational tempo mode in terms of warfighting, whereas Benning, many more couples in kind of a training mode. And in particular, when we were running the intervention at Campbell, and I should say the chaplains were, and we were assessing them, it was right during the ramp up for the surge. So one of the things that's different about Campbell versus Benning, the services were provided in an extraordinarily well done way, maybe the best they've ever been done. Campbell services, though, in contrast, were provided by unit chaplains, whereas at Benning they were provided by family life chaplains at Family Life Center. And that could be a difference in terms of sort of closeness and connection of the chaplains with the units. We really think the big difference, though, is just the difference between missions and level of risk. And in general, historically, you can go to the next one. Historically, in our field, the couples that actually are at higher risk, and I don't mean toxic, but higher risk in terms of family background factors or stress, in this case, a number of deployments and other kinds of things, actually tend to get the most out of these kinds of services. Next. It's also true, and this is a very wonderful thing in the field, it's very clear at this point that there's a lot of positive effects for all couples just about that go through the programs. I mean, sure, you could find some couples that don't get positive effects, but they go across groups, across race, culture, etc., that there's positive effects for this kind of thing. Now, I want to mention a couple of takeaways and then move on. Next. And go to the next one. Sobering news, of course, is that military couples are under extraordinary stress. And by the way, one of the things that's very clear in emerging studies at this point is the deployments themselves aren't as clearly connected with how the couples are doing as picking up symptoms of PTSD is. And notice I said picking up symptoms, because I don't mean just being diagnosed with PTSD in a full-blown manner, but soldiers coming back many times with just a few extra kind of symptoms of PTSD has a significant impact on marriage. So the kinds of things, the kind of services that you see in what they're doing in Strong Bonds are the very kinds of things that would be what you'd want to do to help people with those kind of symptoms in terms of staying connected and feeling okay about the conversation, about the connection between the two. One last slide. Good news is this. Not only in this study, but across many studies, that there's positive evidence that we can have impact on military families with programs like the Strong Bonds program. The strongest impacts will likely be with those who need it most. And I want to leave you with one more metaphor, and it's not about dogs front end or back end, but it's this. And this runs through all the discussions this morning and the talks before, and I think it'll be a point in the ones to come. When you think about services, you can differentiate between tracks and trains. We tend to think a lot about the trains. We think about the actual service that we want to get to people. And there's a lot of great trains around. A lot of them are represented in things that people in this room do. But the fact is, trains don't matter if you don't have tracks to where the people are. And we don't often pay as much attention to the tracks. You can always build better trains. You can always improve the trains. You can learn how to make a better train. But we have to pay consistently high-quality attention to the tracks, because that's how you get to people. And my closing comment is this. One of the things that I'm very impressed with in terms of the Strong Bonds initiative is it's a great set of tracks that goes right to where people live. And that's when you can really do some work in meeting the needs of Army families. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General Carver and Dr. Stanley, for that timely presentation. And I'm pleased to introduce two other speakers to you this morning, Mr. Noel Metter from Strong Families and Mr. Hal Runkle from Scream Free, who will each provide presentations aimed at arming you with additional family and parenting skills. Please give a warm welcome to Mr. Metter.
Thank you. It's great to be here. And as you've heard from those that have spoken, I think none of us are immune to the conflict in relationship. And I was even thinking as I was coming back here to share with you the results of a demonstration project that we've been doing at Joint Base Lewis-McChord, that whether you've been deployed for a year or you actually teach these marriage seminars, we all are not immune to the problems and the conflicts that can be in relationship. And even as I was coming back here, my wife and I were having one of those marital moments, and as you know, and my 4-year-old was in the other room, and he was hearing us, kind of tense. It was pretty tense in the room, I have to admit. But he comes in and he says, "Now, if you guys don't stop, you're going to have an opportunity for a timeout." Nothing like getting marital advice from your 4-year-old, especially when you're the executive director of a nonprofit called Stronger Families. But it's been, I believe that though that none of us are immune to it, there's great hope and excitement around the things that are happening, as even what we've just heard from the Strong Bonds. And we've had the chance to do a demonstration project with 9 different brigades, over 200 couples at Joint Base Lewis-McChord. And I'd like to share with you some of the results. And I want to say thanks first to AUSA and TriWest Healthcare for their sponsorship of this demonstration project, along with Major General retired Jimmy Collins and Major General retired Ken Farmer, who are in the room with us today. Next slide. Thank you. So what is oxygen for your relationships? Well, it's really a program that's developed around 4 different components. And the first one is that of a relationship assessment that the couples take before they even come to the seminar. It's developed by Prepare Enrich and Laugh Your Way, 2 nationally researched tools that are available. The couples take this assessment that gives them direct feedback on what's going on in their relationship. They bring those assessments to the intensive training session, and in that training session, we help them create both an action plan that's specifically targeted to the needs that are going on in their relationship, and then also a support network around their marriage and relationship. And this has been significant as we've been working with these couples because so much has changed during the deployment cycle. So many things have competed for their attention and their time, and so when they're coming back, having something that can really drill down to the very issues that are going on in the relationship, almost an X-ray look into the health of the relationship, has been instrumental in being able to assess and begin to help them work through their relationship. And the couple checkup assessment that we use actually looks at both the growth areas and the strength areas of the relationship, along with the flag page that looks at the 5 motivations of their heart. And so you can understand, this is where it's been significant, is as we've, even in one session, the couple begins to work with these assessments, and they begin to build this action plan that from the motivation of their spouse's heart, they're able to say, how do I relate? How do I reinforce? How do I respond to my spouse given the results of the instruments that we're using? It's been a part of the process of them being able to begin to move forward in their relationship. Another part of the seminar during the time of 6 hours that they're with us is that we help them develop a support network. And as you've heard from up here, the importance of not going alone is critical for these couples. And we spend a significant amount of time looking at what level of support do they need. And it might be that for some of them, they need the direct counseling that's provided to them there on the base. It might be that they get plugged into a small group or a mentor couple that can walk along with them. And so we're very intentional about what does that support look like in their relationship moving forward. And then the last part of the seminar is where we take time to introduce them to an online support network that they have access to at any point in the deployment cycle. And so it's one that they can get resources through video and audio of national experts that can answer a lot of the questions that they're going through ongoing past the seminar. Next slide. So how does the Oxygen Seminar help military families? Well, one of the key parts that we wanted to do in this demonstration project is to make sure that it was developing resiliency in the Army families. And we asked them some of the questions, like how likely will this change your relationship? And 34% rated it as a 4 on a 5-point scale. 50% rated it as a 5 on a 5-point scale. Well, another question that we asked them in the post-survey was, how likely is it to strengthen the resiliency of military couples, and 35% rated as a 4, and then 59% rated as a 5. And we believe that the high ranking of this came through much of the customization of what we were helping these couples work through in their action plan. It wasn't just the generic communication tools that we were teaching them, but it was specifically tailored to the very needs that they were dealing with as they came to the seminar. Along with that support network is one of the reasons that we believe that this is a tool that creates that resiliency in Army families. And it also moves beyond the seminar experience. A certain amount of change can happen during that 6 hours of intensive training. We also believe that much of that training, much of the change that's going to be necessary for the couple is going to be what happens after they leave the seminar. And so providing that action plan along with a support network that's online, we've found the benefit of these couples being able to make those necessary changes as they move forward in the deployment cycle. Next slide. How does Oxygen Seminar help unit leadership? And this is one of the things that we've been working with at Joint Base Lewis-McChord, is that because of the assessments that the couples are taking, there's a group report that is available that the senior leadership can look at, and it assesses the different stressors as a group, the whole of the group. And again, keep note of the fact that this is not individually looking at each couple. This is not a wellness assessment that looks at each of the individual couples, but rather the group that's attending the seminar. It assesses what are the stressors, what are the things that are the growth areas as a group that need to be considered. And this has been instrumental in being able to position chaplains and senior leadership to be able to act upon the knowledge of what are these couples dealing with in my brigade. The other part is used as a reintegration process. Again, it can be used at any part of the deployment cycle, but particularly the demonstration project that we've been doing at Joint Base Lewis McChord, we've been focusing on the reintegration part because of the need of, as they're coming back together, using the assessments to really understand where they're at. This has been part of the process, and the fact that at Joint Base Lewis McChord, using it on a one-day model where it's actually been part of the workday for the chaplain to be able to get more couples to be able to come and provide the necessary resources to them. Next slide. Here's some of the post-survey findings. Was Oxygen seminar helpful in the reintegration process? And 92%, I believe, I need my glasses on, rated as a 4 or a 5 on a 5-point scale. And do you intend to do anything differently as a result of participating in the Oxygen for Relationships seminar and or as a result of the material provided today? And again, you can see the results that we've been continuing to vet through the survey. And I just want to read a couple different testimonies from those couples who have participated in this demonstration project. One guy wrote to us, he said, "The night before I came, I said, oh man, I'll be falling asleep. Well, it was totally opposite. I loved it and would go to another in the future and will pass on the info to other couples who are needed, that Oxygen is for them." Another husband wrote, "Oxygen has given me important insight into how my wife's feelings and emotions towards me are connected to how I show love to her." And the last one was a couple who said, "I realized for the first time that we can actually work through the issues in our marriage. This is the first time there has been a sense of hope in our marriage." This has been, and this is the part that gets me, because we know that there's many different resources that are available, but it's the ones that are able to effect that change and really create the hope, the sense of hope in these couples' lives is what we are excited about with the program Oxygen for Relationships. Next slide. The program development over the next 12 months, we really are looking at providing ongoing support to military families, whether in CONUS or deployed. And we believe that online support network, creating and having available to them once they leave the seminar, is an important part for them to be able to download video or hear audio of national experts, to ask questions live to some of these national experts that we make available, is an important component of being able to continue to give the resiliency to these couples to move forward in their relationship. And the last part is that of a train-the-trainer model. We've designed Oxygen for Your Relationship so that it can be led by facilitators, and we can come and train so that, again, to be able to reach the needs wherever you're at is a big part of what we're going to be doing over the next 12 months. Last slide. So how can you get Oxygen Seminar at your installation? Well, certainly, I'd love to talk to you. If this is of interest to you, you can come by our booth, 3717, or you can email or call. But we are privileged. It's been an honor to be able to do this demonstration project and see the help to be provided to these couples at Joint Base Lewis McChord. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Metter. And now we're going to hear from Mr. Runkle. Please give him a warm welcome.
There was going to be a handheld mic up here. Can we? Right to my, there it is. Great. I like to limp around, as you're going to see. Somebody asked me if this was a combat wound. The only combat I encounter is getting my kids to school in the morning. All right, we're going to do something. Well, first, thanks to Sylvia, wherever you are. Thank you so much for inviting me. I appreciate this privilege. This is an honor for me, and I'll talk more about that later. But we've been sitting for a while, so we got an exercise. Everybody, stand up. Stand up, do some stretching, all right? And what you're going to do is turn to your neighbor and say one thing that your kids or spouse can continually do that drives you nuts. Okay? One thing your kids do that drives you nuts. Just one. I know it's easy to list a bunch. Yes.